Have you ever had a moment where you stopped and thought, when did I start feeling invisible in my own family? Maybe it was during a holiday dinner when your story got interrupted for the third time in a row. Maybe it was the way your grown child brushed off your advice with a chuckle, or how they only seem to call when they need something. It's not that they're bad people. They're your kids. You love them with your whole heart. But something changed along the way. And now you're left wondering, is it just me? It's not just you. And you are not alone. As we grow older, something quietly shifts in the way the world, and sometimes even our families, treat us. The roles change, the expectations shift. And if we're not careful, our sense of peace, dignity, and even our independence can slowly get chipped away. Not in some big dramatic way, but through small things, things that feel like just part of life or not worth making a fuss over. But here's the truth. You have spent decades building your life. You've worked hard, loved deeply, and shown up for others, over and over again. You deserve to spend your later years with peace of mind, with respect, and with space to enjoy this new chapter. That means drawing some gentle but firm lines in the sand. That means knowing which behaviors from your adult children should never become your new normal. Let's talk about the first one. It's probably the most common, and surprisingly, the most silently damaging. Disrespect. Disrespect isn't always loud. It doesn't always come in the form of yelling or name-calling. In fact, it's often quiet. It hides in a sarcastic tone when you share a memory, in the eye roll when you speak up at the dinner table, in the laugh that follows when you ask a question, like you're out of touch or just don't get it anymore. And because it's subtle, it can make you question yourself. You start to wonder, am I being too sensitive? Am I just old-fashioned? But no, you are not overreacting. You're simply asking for something every human being deserves: respect. Respect for your wisdom, for your experiences, for the years you've lived and the lessons you've learned. You may have given up sleep, comfort, even your dreams at times to raise your children. Wanting them to truly listen when you speak, that's not asking too much. It's not about demanding praise or reverence. It's about being seen, being heard, being treated like someone who still matters. And if that's not happening, if you're constantly left feeling small, outdated, or like a burden, you don't have to stay silent. You don't have to cause a scene or confront anyone in front of others. But in a calm, private moment, you can say, when you laugh at my stories or brush off my words, it makes me feel like they don't matter, like I don't matter. Sometimes, that one sentence is all it takes to change the dynamic. And if it's not, if the subtle jabs and dismissiveness continue, it's okay to step back, to say, I'm not going to sit through conversations that make me feel invisible. You're not being dramatic, you're protecting your peace, and your peace is worth protecting. Now let's talk about something that's just as important, but even harder to bring up. Money. Many of us grew up with a strong sense of responsibility for our kids' well-being. When they were young, they depended on us for everything: food, clothes, school, support. And even as adults, it's only natural to want to help when they struggle. Maybe you helped them with rent once, or covered their credit card bill, or sent a little extra when they lost their job. After all, that's what family does, right? But over time, that just once help can become a pattern. The calls for help come more often. Just a little bit to get by this month, Mom. I promise this is the last time, Dad. And slowly, without even realizing it, you're dipping into your savings. You're cutting into your retirement. You're giving away the security you worked a lifetime to build for someone who, by now, should be standing on their own 2 feet. This is not about being stingy. This is not about turning your back on your children. It's about balance, about making sure that in the act of helping them, you're not quietly harming yourself. The truth is, every dollar that leaves your account isn't just money. It's energy, it's stability, it's peace of mind. Maybe you spent years budgeting, going without, dreaming of the day you could finally relax, only to find yourself still paying bills that aren't yours, still bailing someone out. still living with that quiet knot in your stomach, wondering, will I have enough if something goes wrong? You deserve better than that. And if you're in that situation now, if you've been financially supporting an adult child for months or even years, it's not too late to change the pattern. You don't have to cut them off cold turkey, but you can set boundaries. You can say, I can't keep helping in the same way. You can offer to sit down and work on a budget together. You can say, I'll match what you save. Or, I'll help you apply for jobs. Or even, I love you, but I need to prioritize my own stability now. And yes, it may feel uncomfortable. You might worry they'll be angry or disappointed. But boundaries aren't punishments. They're lessons. They're acts of love that say, I believe you are capable. And I believe I deserve peace too. Your retirement is not a backup plan for someone else's irresponsibility. It's your time. You've earned it. Let's take a breath here. This isn't easy. These aren't simple topics, and they come with a lot of emotion. But if no one has told you this before, let me say it now. You have every right to protect your heart, your energy, and your future. You are not selfish for wanting peace. You are not difficult for wanting to be respected. And you are not unloving for saying enough. Because this chapter of your life isn't about proving your worth through endless giving. It's about living fully, freely, and with dignity. So let's keep going. We've looked at disrespect and financial dependence, two of the most common ways older parents find themselves overwhelmed, drained, or even disrespected in their own families. But there's another behavior that often sneaks in next. One that's quiet, subtle, and hard to name, but just as damaging. Let's talk about that next. Sometimes, the things that hurt us most don't come with raised voices or obvious demands. Sometimes, they come wrapped in concern or disguised as sadness. They sneak in during those quiet moments when we're simply trying to live our lives, and suddenly, we find ourselves second-guessing our choices, bending over backwards, feeling guilty for setting even the smallest boundary. That's emotional manipulation. And if you've ever said no and then felt like a terrible parent because of it, chances are you've experienced it too. You might not even see it right away. Maybe you finally decided to say no to babysitting the grandkids because you had plans you were excited about. And just as you're heading out the door, your daughter calls and says, I guess I'll have to cancel my interview. I thought you'd want to help. No yelling, no blame. Just a sigh, a pause, a little silence, and suddenly you're putting your keys down and reaching for your coat. Or maybe you told your son you can't send any more money this month, and he responds with, I just thought after everything I've been through you'd be more supportive. And there it is, that deep, familiar sting in your chest. That sinking feeling that maybe you're the one in the wrong. Maybe you should say yes, just this once, even if it costs you sleep or peace or your own well-being. Let me say this loud and clear. You are not wrong for saying no. You are allowed to protect your energy. You are allowed to say, not today. And you are allowed to set limits without being made to feel like you're failing as a parent. Emotional manipulation often works because of one powerful thing: love. Your children know you love them. They know your soft spots. And sometimes, even without realizing it, they use that love to get their way. A long pause, a guilt trip, a well-placed comment about how much they're struggling, and suddenly, you're doubting yourself. But love isn't guilt. Love isn't pressure. Love is respect. And respect includes honoring your right to say no. If this is something you recognize in your life, here's one small phrase that can make a big difference. Let me think about it. You don't have to say yes or no in the moment. You don't have to respond under pressure. That one sentence gives you room to breathe. Space to check in with yourself. Time to ask, do I really want to do this, or am I afraid to disappoint them? And when you're ready to answer, speak with love, but also with clarity. You can say, I notice that when I say no, you make me feel guilty. I love you, but I need to make choices for myself without being pressured. It might feel awkward at first. It might create a little tension. But that's okay. Because healthy relationships, even with your grown kids, are built on honesty, not obligation. And if your child truly loves you, they'll listen. They may not get it right away. They may push back at first. But over time, they'll learn. Your boundaries aren't rejection. They're a sign that you love yourself too. And that love, it matters just as much. Now, let's talk about something else that tends to happen when we don't set those boundaries. Your time, your home, your entire routine, they all start getting swallowed up by someone else's schedule. You know what I'm talking about. The unannounced visits. The calls at the last minute. The assumption that you'll drop everything to run over and help, no matter what you had planned. One day you're enjoying a quiet cup of tea, reading a book you finally had time for. The next, you're folding someone else's laundry, making dinner, or sitting in traffic because they needed a last-minute favor. And at first, you don't mind. You love your family. You enjoy feeling useful, staying connected. But over time, the balance shifts. Your plans, your hobbies, your rest, they all take a back seat. And the message, whether spoken or not, becomes loud and clear. Your time is not your own anymore. Let me stop right there and remind you of something important. Your time is sacred. You do not have to earn your rest. You do not have to prove your value by being constantly available. You are allowed to say, "I need this weekend for myself." You are allowed to turn off the phone. You are allowed to live at your own pace. And if your adult children are treating your home like a convenience store, always open, always stocked, always ready, it's time for a gentle reset. You don't have to slam the door, but you can kindly say, "I love helping out, but I need a few days' notice." Or, "I'm happy to babysit Saturday afternoon, but I won't be able to stay all day." That's not being cold, that's being honest. And if you're worried that setting these limits will hurt the relationship, I want you to think about something. Boundaries don't damage relationships, they reveal them. They show you who respects your space and who only values your yes. And yes, the ones who push back the hardest are often the ones who needed the boundary most. As we get older, our energy changes. We don't bounce back from long days the way we used to, and we shouldn't have to. Taking a nap, enjoying quiet mornings, spending time doing what you love, these are not luxuries. They're part of a full, healthy life. And if helping out is leaving you exhausted or frustrated, it's okay to step back. It's okay to say, "I need more time for me." You have given so much already. This chapter, this season of life, is meant to be for you. You're not just the person who raised them anymore. You're someone who still has dreams, still has goals, still has joy to chase and peace to protect. And you deserve to build a life that reflects that. Sometimes people push back on boundaries because they're afraid. They worry that saying no means losing connection. But real connection doesn't come from always saying yes. It comes from mutual respect, from showing up, not out of guilt, but out of love. If your children love you, and I believe they do, they will adjust. They will grow. They will begin to see you not just as mom or dad, but as a whole person. A person with limits, needs, preferences, and every right to live life on their own terms. So take a deep breath. Trust yourself. And remember, you do not exist to make everyone else comfortable. You exist to live. And you still have so much life left to live. There's a kind of hurt that doesn't come from harsh words or obvious conflict. It comes from silence, from absence, from realizing that when you need someone, no one seems to notice. And for many parents in later life, this quiet pain becomes one of the heaviest to carry. You may have experienced it in small ways at first. You went through a medical appointment alone and thought, "I didn't expect much, maybe just a call." Or you had a tough week, felt low or tired, and waited for the phone to ring. It didn't. You told yourself they were busy, they have their own lives. You didn't want to be a burden, so you stayed quiet. And that silence slowly starts to feel like invisibility. This is what emotional neglect looks like. It's not cruelty. It's not always intentional. But that doesn't make it any less painful. You were the one who showed up when they were sick, scared, or struggling. You were the constant. And when that care isn't returned, not in equal measure, but in meaningful ways, it can feel like the ground shifts beneath you. Love is not only what we give, it's also what we receive. And you deserve to be seen, supported, and remembered. Not because of what you did for others, but because your life still matters. Right now, today. One of the hardest things for parents to do is speak honestly about this kind of loneliness. There's a fear of sounding needy, a fear of being brushed off, a fear of confirming what you already suspect. But honesty, when it's calm and clear, can be powerful. You might say something as simple as, "I've been feeling a bit alone lately. It would mean a lot to hear from you more often." Or, "I have an appointment coming up and I'd really appreciate not doing it alone." That's not weakness, that's being human. And sometimes that gentle honesty is enough to wake people up. Life moves fast. People get distracted. But clear words have a way of cutting through the noise. And if they respond, if they show up, that's something to build on. But if they don't, if the pattern stays the same and the silence continues, then something important needs to shift. Not with anger, not with blame, but with where you place your emotional energy. You don't have to keep pouring love into places that never seem to notice it. You can begin to invest more in the people who do show up. A neighbor who checks in, a friend who calls just to talk, someone at church, a community group, a class, or even a distant relative who remembers your birthday and asks how you're really doing. This isn't rejection. It's realignment. You're not closing your heart. You're simply turning it toward where it's welcomed. Now, there's another behavior that often walks hand in hand with neglect, and it can be just as damaging: constant criticism, especially when it comes disguised as concern. You tell your children you're thinking about downsizing, moving somewhere quieter, maybe closer to the ocean or a warmer climate. And instead of curiosity or support, you hear, "That doesn't make sense," or "You can't do that," or "That house is part of our memories." Or maybe you share that you're trying something new, a class, a hobby, even dating, and you're met with raised eyebrows, nervous laughter, or warnings that feel more like judgment than care. Suddenly, the excitement you felt turns into embarrassment, doubt, a sense that you've overstepped some invisible line. Here's something you need to hear. Your life is still yours. Your children do not get to decide how you live it, not now, not ever. You have lived long enough to know what brings you joy. You've made mistakes and learned from them. You've adapted, endured, and grown. You do not need permission to make choices that feel right to you. And when criticism comes wrapped in worry, it's okay to listen. Once. It's okay to consider their perspective, but you don't have to absorb it. You don't have to carry it. You can say, calmly and kindly, "I've thought about this, and I'm comfortable with my decision." No arguing, no defending, no explaining your entire life story. You are not on trial. Sometimes, that criticism has more to do with their fears than your choices. Their fear of change, their fear of losing control, their discomfort with the idea that you are still growing, still evolving, still choosing yourself. But their fear does not get to define your future. And it's perfectly okay to keep some decisions private. Not out of secrecy, but out of self-respect. Protecting your peace is not hiding, it's wisdom. Now let's talk about the final behavior, one that often goes unnoticed until it's deeply ingrained. Being expected to always give care but never receive it in return. It often starts innocently, helping with the grandchildren, picking them up from school, stepping in just for a little while. And at first it feels good to be needed, to be close, to have a sense of purpose. But then the requests increase. One afternoon becomes 3 days. 3 days becomes every week. And before you know it, your retirement feels less like a reward and more like another full-time job. And when you try to talk about your future, your health, your needs, your care, the conversation gets uncomfortable. People change the subject. They say, "Don't worry about that now," or "We'll figure it out later." Later is not a plan. You are not just a helper. You are not free labor. You are not endlessly available just because you're retired. Your time matters. Your energy matters. Your future matters. If helping with family brings you joy, that's wonderful. But if you feel drained, overwhelmed, or resentful, that's your body and heart asking for balance. You are allowed to say, "I can help once a week, but not every day." Or, "I need a few mornings just for myself." That's not selfish. That's sustainable. And when it comes to your own care, don't wait for a crisis. Speak clearly. Make plans. Decide what you want, who you trust, how you want to live if your needs change. These conversations may feel uncomfortable, but clarity now prevents confusion and stress later. And if your children aren't ready to have those talks, that doesn't mean you stop planning. You can involve a trusted friend, a professional, someone who respects your wishes. You do not need anyone's permission to protect your independence and dignity. Because that's what this is really about. Dignity, not control, not distance, not punishment. Dignity means being treated with respect. It means your no is honored. It means your time is valued. It means your presence matters, not just your usefulness. It means you are allowed to live fully, deeply, and unapologetically at any age. You are not too old to start again. You are not too late to speak up. And you are certainly not done. If this message resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your story matters, and you never know who might feel less alone because you shared it. If you found value here, please like the video and subscribe to the channel Strong Elderly Life. It helps us continue creating honest, supportive content just for this stage of life. And as you go about your day, remember this. Choosing dignity is not pushing people away. It's inviting the right kind of love in. You are worthy of respect, peace, and joy, today and always. Here's to living your life on your own terms, with strength, clarity, and heart. You're worth it.